Though most UFO encounters happen in isolation, Travis Walton's case shattered that pattern.
There's been a tremendous amount of scrutiny of my experience, and you know, I used to be, just outraged at being so questioned, but I had to realize that, this is pretty strong stuff, and a certain amount of, people taking a hard look at it is warranted. I agree with Carl Sagan when he says extraordinary claims deserve extraordinary evidence.
In 1975, he didn't just claim to see a UFO, he was taken by one. Lifted from the forest floor and gone for 5 days, Walton vanished after a craft was witnessed at close range by 6 of his friends and co-workers, all watching in horror. Police launched searches. Skeptics swarmed. Journalists pushed for a confession. Yet despite years of pressure, ridicule, and relentless attempts to tear the story apart, neither Walton nor the 6 men who saw it unfold have ever recanted. Decades later, all 7 still tell the same account. Now, with new footage from Arizona and renewed interest, the question remains, how much of Walton's account is fact, and how much is fiction?
There was a kind of a weird feeling in the air, which may have been some sort of staticky electrical field or maybe magnetic or something. But at the same time, the sound was just extended off of both ranges, the high and the low of human hearing, to where the lows were something you really felt more than heard, and the highs were kind of like something that was like inside your head rather than coming through your ear. It was just such an intense sound, and with a wide range of frequencies there. But the men in the truck kind of felt a vibration that seemed to shake everything. As he took me out of there, it wasn't unkind or hostile, but it wasn't real encouraging as far as getting any information out of me. But I figured maybe he'll tell me when we get out of here. Take that helmet off, whatever. But the people who were dressed like him that he left me with weren't any more informative. They didn't answer anything. No sounds. It's almost like they didn't want to have the most minimum kind of interaction that they could with me. Because they were hiding something, or because I was in such a crazy state, I don't know.
The UFO incident involving Travis Walton. On the evening of November 5th, 1975, a routine workday for 22-year-old Travis Walton and his 6 logging co-workers turned into something extraordinary that would echo among ufologists for decades. The 7 men were finishing their contract thinning trees for the U.S. Forest Service in the remote Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Snowflake, Arizona, when they piled into their truck at dusk and began the drive home. The sun had just set, and the forest road was dim when one of the crew noticed a strange, bright glow filtering through the trees. At first, they thought it was a fire or the aftermath of a plane crash, but when they rounded a bend, the source of the light revealed itself. It was a silent, disc-shaped object hovering close to the ground, and it was glowing so strangely that the men realized they weren't looking at something normal. The witnesses were staring at a strange aircraft, about 15 to 20 feet in diameter, and it was suspended just beyond the tree line. Its surface was glowing with a golden luminescence that they couldn't explain. Its shape was like 2 shallow bowls nestled lip to lip. The strangeness of the UFO seemed to attract Travis like a magnet. He ignored the shouts of his friends and co-workers, and instead, he dropped from the truck and jogged toward the mysterious craft. Before his co-workers knew it, he was standing within mere feet of the object, under its glowing underside, when the scene became terrifying in an instant. Without warning, a brilliant blue-green beam of light shot down from the base of the hovering disk and struck him. The beam didn't look like anything humans had made, and it struck with a massive force, lifting Walton off his feet and hurling him backward through the air. His body arched and then crashed hard onto the forest floor some yards away. The loggers were terrified that the same fate might befall them, so they fled into the night with their hearts pounding and minds racing. After a harrowing escape, the men realized that they had left Travis behind. They started to debate on whether they should return or rescue him, but their guilt caused them to turn back to the clearing, only to find that both Travis and the glowing disk had vanished without a trace. This made them even terrified, and they went to the only place they thought could help. Search and police response. After Travis Walton vanished into the forest on the evening of November 5, 1975, his 6 shaken co-workers raced into the nearby town of Heber, Arizona, and reported him missing to the Navajo County Sheriff's Office. Crew Chief Mike Rogers reached a phone booth and called Deputy Chuck Ellison, and his voice was quavering as he told them what he had seen. But who would believe that his friend was struck by a beam of light and then taken away by a mysterious craft in the woods? Within minutes, law enforcement was investigating a missing person case that gripped the entire county. Sheriff Marlon Gillespie and Undersheriff Ken Coplin arrived shortly after to take statements from the men and assess the scene. The crew was obviously shaken, and it was clear that they saw something strange, but the law enforcement officers didn't believe them. It sounded more like science fiction than a missing persons report. The search that followed was vast and intense. As night gave way to day, teams of law enforcement officers, Forest Service personnel, volunteers, and even local tracking dogs spread across the woodland around Turkey Springs. But in the hours that passed, they didn't find anything, and the atmosphere surrounding the investigation went from concern to suspicion. They stopped looking outward and started looking towards the crew instead. Rumors fluttered through Snowflake and the surrounding communities, asking questions like, what if the crew wasn't telling the truth? There was no physical evidence of the UFO, and no body was found, so they suspected that Walton met a violent end at the hands of his co-workers. Law enforcement decided to investigate them instead. On November 10, 1975, all 6 of Walton's co-workers submitted to polygraph testing administered by Cy Gilson, a respected examiner from the Arizona Department of Public Safety. The questions were direct and probing, designed around whether any of the men had harmed Walton or were concealing information about what happened to him. Despite the pressure and suspicion, 5 out of the 6 men passed their tests. The one who failed was due to emotional distress during questioning. Amid the search parties, interrogations, and rumors, there were some strange observations. Investigators using Geiger counters in the woods reported background radiation readings, but when they tested the hard hats of the loggers, it was 4 times the normal background radiation. Whatever they saw left its mark on them. Just after they finished their polygraph tests, they received the shocking news. Travis Walton was back. Return after 5 days. At around midnight on November 10, 1975, nearly 5 days and 6 hours after his disappearance, Travis Walton returned in a way that no one would have expected. Lying face down on the side of a quiet road near Hebe, Arizona, he regained consciousness, and he thought it had only been a few hours. Walton opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw hovering above was a highly reflective, silvery saucer-shaped craft. Its smooth hull caught the glimmer of moonlight and cast a strange sense of presence over the scene. In the instant he became aware, the object shot silently into the sky, and vanished, leaving him behind. He was disoriented and weak, but he stumbled to his feet and started walking toward the distant lights. He looked dehydrated, had lost weight, and had grown several days of facial hair. And this was evidence that time had passed, even if he couldn't believe it. He got to a telephone booth at a local gas station and called his family while he was bewildered and shaken. At first, they didn't believe him, but when he identified himself and insisted that he needed help, his brother-in-law, Grant Neff, and his brother Dwayne rushed out to meet him. When they got him home, they realized that there was a mismatch between perception and reality. He believed that only hours had passed since the moment he vanished, unaware that nearly 5 full days had slipped by. When the news of his sudden appearance spread, it led to a shocking debate, and many began to wonder what happened to Travis Walton during those 5 days, and where did he go? Walter's memories. When Travis Walton had finally calmed down, he revealed to the world what had happened to him, and this gave us the clearest UFO footage we've ever seen. The first thing he remembered after the beam blasted him and took him away was a room that seemed eerily familiar. He was in a dim but evenly lit space, lying on a raised metallic table, and he thought he had been taken to the hospital after the accident. His head and body ached, and he felt an intense pain all over him as he tried to gather his bearings. When he looked closely, he realized that he definitely wasn't in a hospital, and the figures around him weren't humans. Surrounding the table were 3 humanoid beings, each one about 4 to 5 feet tall, with pale skin and disproportionately large, bald heads. Walton later said that their most unsettling feature was their eyes, as it was huge, dark, and intense. The unusual figures were clad in jumpsuit-like outfits, and they didn't say anything, only observing him like he was some kind of specimen. From confusion, he started to feel alarmed because these beings looked strangely human. They had massive eyes that seemed to follow his every move, and they kept quiet. He said his instinct was defensive rather than aggressive, and that fear forced him to react. Suddenly, the strange creatures left the room entirely. When they left, Walton was able to assess the room. The walls were smooth metal, the lighting was uniform, but he didn't see any medical equipment. The only thing he saw was unfamiliar textures and shapes that were definitely not expected from humans. At that moment, he realized something shocking had happened to him. Encounters inside the craft. Since he was alone, he slipped out into a curving hallway that stretched before him with seamless, glowing halls. The corridor made no sound, but it was humming faintly beneath his steps as he tried to find a way to escape. He eventually found himself in front of a circular chamber, with a single chair perched in its center. The room was empty, except for this chair, and what seemed to be 3 closed doorways set into the rounded walls. As he approached the set, small, angular, and unlike anything he had seen on Earth, the atmosphere changed. The overhead lighting dimmed, and points of light started to appear, as if there were stars projecting onto a dark dome above him. It was as if he had stepped into some kind of planetarium-like chamber. Walton examined the chair's armrests and noticed there were a lot of controls, levers, and buttons. When he pushed a lever, the star-like display above shifted. He backed away from the chair, worried about what he might press, and continued toward one of the surrounding doors, searching for an exit. Suddenly, a sound from behind alerted him, and turning, he saw a figure unlike the smaller beings he had encountered earlier. This new entity stood roughly 6 feet tall, muscular, and clad in a blue jumpsuit with a transparent helmet. Most striking was the creature's eyes. It was golden hazel in color and strange. Without speaking, the figure gestured for Walton to follow, taking him by the arm and leading him onward. Together, they traversed another passage that opened onto a vast, aircraft-like hangar space. The ceiling arched high above them, and scattered around the room were several saucer-shaped craft, gleaming silently under the diffused lighting. These objects were larger and more numerous than the one Walton had seen in the forest, evoking awe and confusion as he took in the scale of the place. Final moments before waking. After being guided by a tall, human-like being through a larger hangar-like space filled with silent, disc-shaped craft, Walton's path intersected with 3 other human-like figures, which marked the final stretch of what he experienced. These beings, described later by Walton as 2 men and a woman, wore outfits similar to his guides, but lacked helmets, and they exuded a strange calm that contrasted with the silent tension of their environment. He felt even more fear in this room. He tried to ask them questions, but they didn't give any answers, and their expressions were stable. Without verbal communication or any clear explanation of their intentions, the 3 figures walked toward him to question him. They grabbed him by the arm and guided him toward a small table. As he was positioned upon it, he became aware of the strange device in the hands of the woman, which looked more like a breathing mask. When the mask was pasted over his mouth and nose, he started to lose consciousness. He made a final effort to protest, and his instincts were driven by fear and a desire for control. But before he knew it, he passed out. The next time he opened his eyes, it was 5 days later, and he was on the roadside outside Heber, Arizona. Public reaction and tests. After Travis Walton reappeared on November 10, 1975, the world exploded with scrutiny, disbelief, and intense media attention. This became one of the most debated events of the era in UFO lore. Walton's physical condition quickly attracted medical attention. The doctors examined him for obvious trauma, dehydration, malnutrition, and exposure after his days-long absence in the harsh Arizona wilderness. While he appeared weakened and disoriented, medical professionals found no clear signs of significant physical injury or drug influence, a finding that bewildered both supporters and skeptics. The lack of definitive physical trauma made it difficult for authorities to place his ordeal strictly within known medical or forensic explanations. Meanwhile, the law enforcement and the public were struggling to interpret what had happened. The extraordinary claim that a fellow human had vanished under strange circumstances and returned with a story of extraterrestrial contact shocked many. The local police statements reflected this tension. Some officers remained open to the unexplained, while others suspected the possibility of deception or fabrication. But there was no hard evidence, like body or physical traces. So, they decided to do a polygraph test for Walton and his co-workers again. Within days of his return, Walton and his 6 logging co-workers underwent a series of lie detector examinations to address growing suspicions that the disappearance could have been staged or that foul play was involved. Initial tests produced mixed results, but Walton failed a widely publicized polygraph that was administered after the incident, causing skeptics to be worried about whether he was deceiving them. But the later professionally controlled tests, which were conducted by experienced examiners, and it showed no deception on relevant questions about his experience. The media played a major role in shaping the public's perception. Newspapers, television shows, and later documentaries spotlighted the contradictory test outcomes, the eerie consistency of the eyewitness testimony from Walton's co-workers, and the sensational nature of the narrative itself. Coverage ranged from earnest curiosity about potential extraterrestrial visitation to outright ridicule and skepticism, with commentators dissecting everything from Walton's demeanor in interviews to the scientific reliability of polygraph examinations. But when you think this was the clearest UFO footage ever found, in Siberia, experts have taken another video of what seems to be a shocking UFO flying at low altitude. Triangle shape UFO. In 2021, an unusual aerial sighting in the remote Siberian desert sparked interest among UFO enthusiasts and researchers. A drone operator, exploring the vast and sparsely populated area, captured video footage of a triangular-shaped object moving silently across the landscape at low altitude. The incident happened in an isolated region, far from urban centers. But when the video was released, the world couldn't believe what they were seeing. The video was recorded by the drone as part of a routine exploration, and it shows a distinct triangular craft hovering and gliding smoothly above the desert terrain. Observers noticed the object's strange design, which was different from any known aircraft. Unlike typical planes or helicopters, the craft exhibited no visible engines or propellers and moved with remarkable stability and precision. The low altitude of the object allowed the drone to approach it closely, offering an unusual and detailed perspective rarely seen in UFO footage. Witnesses to the video described the sighting as eerie and mesmerizing. The triangular object appeared to maintain a steady trajectory while adjusting its position, as if it was responding to the drone's movements. Its metallic surface reflected the sunlight, making the shape clearly distinguishable against the Siberian sky. The footage quickly circulated around ufologists. While skeptics have suggested possibilities such as experimental military aircraft or optical illusions caused by drone cameras, the remote location and the distinct behavior of the object make such explanations less convincing to many observers. Experts in drone and aviation technology have commented on the precision of the object's movements, noting that conventional drones or aircraft typically exhibit more turbulence or mechanical noise. But just like with any other UFO sighting, definitive identification remains elusive. With the Travis Walton abduction and the recent sighting, the question everyone is asking is, what's real and what's false?